Dear social worker, welcome to the podcast that prioritizes the person behind the title social worker. I'm your host, Lisa Rann, and I'm here to inspire and encourage your personal development, promote self-care and leadership development in your social work practice. I transitioned from a decade in social work to a leadership development coach for social workers nationwide, where I offer a safe and independent space for reflection and help you overcome professional or personal challenges. I offer resources, books, journals, and social work events. Today, we're going to talk about leadership in social work practice. So, let's talk. So most social workers that I speak to in my coaching sessions or just in general, they don't see themselves as leaders. You're like, leader? What does that mean? I'm not a leader. I'm not a manager. It's like they associate the word leader with being a manager or a senior manager or a director of children's services, right? But I think we should embrace the word leader. And I think this for several reasons. I'm going to outline them in this podcast today, alongside the reason why I'm discussing this today. Firstly, as social workers, we have the unique opportunity to advocate for marginalised individuals and communities. And you might think, yeah, well, I'm in the midst of CP reports and, court statements. I'm busy, right? But in the midst of that busyness, you are advocating. That is the cornerstone of the work that you're doing, right? So you are able to have an influence for change, and a voice for those that may not be able to speak up yet, or a voice for those that are vulnerable. So by seeing yourself as a leader, that means you can effectively mobilize resources, implement innovative strategies, and inspire others to create those positive social changes, right? But some of you, particularly if my coachees may be listening to this, you may be thinking, but I just don't see myself as a leader. And this is something else that comes up quite a lot, which is um, imposter syndrome. Because often social workers struggle to view themselves as leaders. And this is for several reasons, right? And what comes up in coaching sessions, particularly, are mainly around personal reasons, mainly around the way one views themselves, or how they think others view them. But there are some complicating factors here. One of which is the complex nature of the work. I just referred to busyness earlier on, right? The complex nature of the work can make it challenging to measure the tangible outcomes that are actually happening. There are direct impacts. Yes, you may have a children in need family that is, with you for a number of months or years, but you are making a difference. And there are tangible outcomes, but sometimes because of workload, busyness, home life balance, whatever that may be, sometimes because of those elements, it's difficult to actually see the difference that you're making. So it's like trying to see the wood through the trees. It's not easy to do when your mind is busy, or when you're feeling exhausted, or when you're feeling tired, or when you're putting your all into one family or one assessment. So I think we have to lend some thought to how does the complex nature of social work have an impact on how we see ourselves. It may be an idea to think about what busyness is and how that plays a part in how we see ourselves. So busyness, breaking it down, is a full schedule, right? Which often involves you multitasking, responsibilities, and some level of pace, right? Minimal downtime, demanding lifestyle, constant stream of what I would call a conveyor belt of meetings and reports and visits. It often involves juggling multiple projects simultaneously whilst trying to meet deadlines, attend meetings, dealing with workload, etc., etc. So when we think about all that busyness encompasses, first of all, you have to consider, is that something you identify with? Most social workers I know will say, well, absolutely, goes without saying. But I did meet a social worker last week, actually, who was very comfortable with her pace of work, the level of work, the challenging nature of the work, sitting very comfortable in that and feeling as if there was work-life balance. So busyness is subjective. And I think we have to be mindful, particularly managers, you have to be mindful when social workers are saying to you they're really busy. Define what that is, get an understanding of what busy means for them, because busyness for each of us is different. And clarifying that will help you get a better understanding of what they mean by busy, and hopefully that gives you a clearer way of supporting them. Being busy and busyness in itself can have a significant impact on how you see yourself and how social workers see themselves. And I'm going to break down just a few here. And I'm going to link this back to leadership in social work. Because I can't remember where I've read this, but there is a saying around leaders having a calmer pace and not seeming to be, running around and being flustered. Having a calmer pace will certainly give an air of leadership. But let's get into these few points. One of the first questions I'm going to ask you is, are you defined by your busyness? Does your busyness define you? Is your busyness part of your identity? So I know certainly on my journey of being a social worker, it consumed my life. Whilst I was enjoying it, it was all consuming, and it left little time for reflection and self-care. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do now. That's why this podcast is here now. And that's why, I am here for social workers that need to find a way or want to find a way to prioritize their well-being and self-care, because I've been on the other end of that, where I feel like I've got very little time for myself. And that is also linked to professional identity, right? Because that could become closely intertwined with being busy. So it's the association, and that can lead to the perception that your worth is solely defined by the workload, right? So this narrow focus on busyness can diminish the sense of self and make it challenging, really, to see yourselves as multi-dimensional individuals with unique skills that you bring to the table as a social worker, and also beyond social work. It's surprising, and well, I shouldn't say it's surprising because I experienced it myself. I suppose I'm surprised that it's still continuing at the high level it is, when social workers say, actually, I don't have a social life. I barely see friends or speak to them because I'm so consumed with making sure that my children and families are safe and well. And within that, you're diminishing self, and you're becoming further removed from yourself inadvertently, right? This is not conscious. This is part of what can happen when you get carried away in the busyness, in quotes, of social work. We've talked about this lots of times. I'm going to keep talking about it. And in fact, I'm going to share that I've written two new books. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them after this point. but it links very closely to burnout and exhaustion, right? We know, we've been taught this, and I'm going to say it again, but that constant busyness can lead to burnout and exhaustion, physically and emotionally, right? And because you've got demanding caseloads, workloads, you may have long working hours from week to week, it's emotionally taxing. So when there's consistent overwhelm, right, you may struggle to find time for yourself, personal growth, social life. It's like a perpetual state of busyness. And somehow years can just go by being in this state, right? So we've got to recognize that the dangers for this as leaders is it's hindering the ability for some social workers, particularly, to even see a way through career progression. Thinking about, I want to progress to become, a manager or work my way up to become a service manager, but the busyness of everything, the exhaustion, the burnout, all of those are intertwining, and you've just got very little mental capacity, emotional capacity is the right word, emotional capacity to even think about progressing, to even think about what you want to do on the weekend other than, relax. So we have to look at the impact of busyness and how that can actually hinder our progression as social workers in our practice, but also career development. Imposter syndrome, let's talk about that. Imposter syndrome. That really shows up a lot in coaching sessions, but it shows up for different reasons at different times in different scenarios. And I guess, everyone is individual, but it's certainly an undercurrent. And perhaps staying constantly busy, trying to meet high expectations, that can contribute to the imposter syndrome even more. It may be that you feel like you're not doing enough. We talked about earlier about not always seeing or not able to see the direct impact of the work that you're doing. So if that is the case, then you may be in a position where you feel like you're not doing enough or you're not being effective enough and your efforts aren't sufficient. And that can lead to a persistent fear of being exposed as inadequate. Busyness, believe it or not, can perpetuate that mindset. And for some social workers, that means carrying the belief, holding on to the belief that constantly need to work harder to take on more to prove their worth, to prove they can do the job. And I remember some years back, well over 5 years now, there was a lady who stepped up into a senior position. And I just remember, these are the days we were in the office pre-COVID, and I just remember she was so enthusiastic. And so much so, she'd be there before everyone starts, she'd be doing overtime, she would be helping everybody. And I remember one of the colleagues turned around to me and said, something, she's not going to be able to keep that up. She won't be able to keep it up because it was high stress, high demand, it was perpetual, right? And she was helping and supporting others a lot. That's okay, but it's about what you can manage, right? It's about what you can manage. But through discussing and having talks with this senior prac at the time, it was about proving that they could do the job. So can you see how we sometimes can create these beliefs, and these beliefs can hinder us from making progress, or indeed lead us on the path, stepping our feet onto the path of exhaustion and burnout. And within a year, that person resigned. They were really tired. They were worn out. even though they were doing an excellent job. She was a great support, a great support. But keeping it up over a long period of time, it will have its impact, and it will hinder your ability to recognize your leadership capabilities and where you can progress within the organization. It also may it may make you feel like you're not qualified to take on those leadership roles. So you haven't even thought about management positions simply because, the imposter syndrome element of it all is like, "Nah, something, never thought about that. And I'm not going to. I'm too busy." So let's talk about leadership in social work and what that means. First of all, you have to believe that you are a leader. And you have to think about, well, what does being a leader entail? What does that mean for me? Having a clear idea of what a leader means for you and your role is your starting point. Now, if you're in a place of doubt or fear or worry about, or imposter syndrome, as we've been talking about, or busyness, whatever it may be, that is the starting point. It has to be, because as social workers, we are leading. We are leading in change. We're leading in advocacy. We're leading in relationship based practice, systemic practice. We're leading even down to meetings, when we're leading core group meetings, care planning meetings, conferences. The list goes on. Those are all leadership roles. They are all leadership qualities. Your starting point is recognizing them. It's crucial. Think about it. What would you expect from your leader? What do you expect now from your leader? Maybe another question is, what are you not getting from your leader? What do you expect to happen in the event that you need some support from your leader? There's a lot of people, a lot of social workers out there that will think, okay, well, my manager hasn't done this. I would like my manager to do that. Yeah. You're pointing out leadership skills and qualities that you would prefer to be working with. So essentially, we're turning the lens away from your manager or senior management, and we're turning it on yourself and saying, okay, so what do I bring to the table that is resonates leadership qualities? So possessing skills such as empathy, compassion, active listening, problem solving, they're all essential leadership skills. You have that. Thinking about acknowledging your strengths. You can build your confidence just by breaking down what you think a leader is, even from the perspective of what you would like your manager to be giving you in a time of need, and breaking down what skills you possess. This is how you will cultivate confidence, empower yourselves to see yourself as a leader, and therefore advocate for your clients on another level altogether. Yeah, navigating complex systems, influencing positive change. When a person feels confident, when they are walking with their uh, head held high, that's the word I was looking for. There's an air about them, isn't there? There's a feeling, there's an aura, there's a knowing. And all social workers possess leadership qualities. There's a difference between leading and managing. What do you think those differences may be? What do you think that looks like? Because again, it may be that you need to decipher the difference between the two for you to be able to say, okay, management is not for me. Becoming a manager or going into director level is not for me. But I am a leader. I am a leader because I am leading change. I'm at the forefront of a new initiative that the local authority may be doing, right? And let's break this down. Leadership primarily focuses on inspiring and influencing others towards a shared goal or vision. You set the direction, you create a compelling vision, and you motivate individuals or teams to achieve it, right? Leaders will emphasize the why behind their actions, and they foster a sense of purpose and meaning. Management is concerned about organizing and coordinating resources, processes, strategies, right, to help people achieve specific objectives and targets. So their focus typically is on the how to achieve the goal, how to ensure efficiency, and they oversee the day-to-day operations. Okay, so managers typically plan, organize, coordinate, and make sure that things are running smoothly. Now, just listening to that, and that is a simplified, brief version, just to decipher the differences between the two. What are your thoughts now? Do you see yourself as a social work leader, or can you now see the qualities of a leader that you possess, qualities of a manager that you may possess? Now, as we're going through this, you'll probably have picked up that there are crossovers between being a manager and being a leader. And in social work, there's such a broad spectrum, I should say, a broad spectrum of expectations for managing and leading interchangeably throughout the day from hour to hour, right? It can change. But there's a difference between inspiring and influencing and organizing and coordinating. There's a difference between those two. So it's about you thinking, how can I positively contribute to leading change? And what qualities do I need or want to be able to do that? Social work leadership is inherent to the tasks that you carry out every single day. It's just taking the time to step back and think about where you are on that spectrum, where you want to be, what qualities do you have. I want to talk to you about the long-term versus short-term perspective. But before I do that, I want to share this. So lastly, I want to talk to you about long-term versus short-term perspectives and the difference between leaders and managers in that regard. When you're leading, leadership often has a long-term perspective. So they're focusing on the future, they're visionaries, and they're setting a strategic direction. So I want to link this directly to, for example, when you are working with a family who's on a child protection plan. You're very clear at the outset what the objectives are for that plan that need to be achieved before the first review, right? And you're responsible for managing and leading the core group meetings leading up to your CP conference review. Now, within that, you are focused on the long-term perspective, and your role is to bring the core group with you, to work with you to ensure that the objectives of the plan are met. You may need to positively challenge along the way. Not may need to, you will. That does happen. I'm being diplomatic, but yeah, it's true. Positively challenge along the way. You'll identify opportunities such as resources or services, or you may recognize when you speak to the school that they actually have a counseling service or something. You're looking for opportunities and ways for these objectives to be met. And your role in that process is to guide the core group towards the long term success, which is at the end, of course, for the CP plan to turn into a children in need plan. So you have a goal in mind and you work towards it, but you've got to bring everybody with you. And that includes the family, right? The long-term perspective of the CP plan has got to be shared with the family. So as you are talking about the CP plan and saying, like, this is what was agreed at conference, this is what we're going to do, I'm going to come and visit on this day, etc., etc. That is all with the long-term vision in mind. Now, when we're looking at management is a shorter term perspective because it's focusing on immediate objectives and operational efficiency. So it's about meeting targets, handling day-to-day issues, and ensuring that tasks are completed on time. Now, this comes back to the point we made earlier about the fact that they are interchangeable. So if you link this to the CP plan, you are handling day-to-day issues, aren't you? There's crisis intervention. There's solution-focused approaches, relational practice. All of these elements, they're day-to-day issues. You are managing those, but you are leading the plan in its entirety. You're managing something that is short term, so your crisis intervention, but you're leading the plan in its entirety. So when you're looking at long-term versus short-term perspectives, and we're linking it directly to a CP plan, and particularly in the children in care team, this applies very much so. You are leading and managing. So the question remains, do you see yourself as a social work leader now? Or what difference has this information made to the way that you see yourself? So whilst leading and management are closely related, I want you to remember that leadership emphasizes inspiring, motivating, guiding towards a shared vision. Management focuses on organizing, coordinating, and ensuring operational efficiency to achieve specific goals. Yeah. Effective leadership incorporates aspects of management, and effective management often requires leadership skills. So both are essential for success, whatever success is to you. This can, of course, apply to personal life and to practice, but they both involve distinct approaches and priorities. So when the term social work leader is raised in your next conference or your next CPD or that next unit meeting, my hope is that you can identify more with the word leader and have a more of an insight into what that means, how it's applied, and how that links to the work that you're doing, the everyday social work that you're doing. It's key. It's key that leadership skills and qualities are developed. What do I mean by that? You've got to work on developing your professional practice. Work on developing your leadership skills, fine-tuning them. And this is the work that I do as a leadership development coach. I often get the question, what is a leadership development coach? So I'm hoping now that you have a deeper understanding of what a leadership coach can offer. It's a focus on your leadership qualities and strengths and how you can cultivate them and grow them and progress. There's one thing I want to mention before I go. And I know I said there was a last thing, but this is the last thing. And I just want to talk about teamwork and collaboration and the link between busyness and that, because often with CP plans, and I know I certainly did this in the early days, social workers can take a very much a DIY approach. A DIY approach. I'm gonna, execute most of this plan. I'm gonna make sure most things are done. And you're on that train, and not delegating the work to the professionals around the table, or feeling responsible when there is a crisis and you need to intervene, and not calling on other services and professionals to support you in the areas in where they can. And I just wanted to highlight that as one of the main growth areas that I've identified in my coaching practice. Taking on way too much when actually there is an opportunity for other professionals and services to support the family in a crisis or in a particular area of need. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's about you thinking about, where is that coming from? What's the story that you're telling yourself when you are taking that approach? What is the impact of taking that approach? This is key in management and key in leadership. That self-awareness of how you show up and what are some of the reasons behind the way that you practice and the way that you communicate. This is what leadership is about. Now, you may turn up at one of my leadership coaching sessions and say, I'm facing a challenge here, and my challenge is imposter syndrome, for example. And I would ask you questions to help understand and unpick, what is the imposter syndrome to you and how is that showing up? Gaining clarity, understanding the story behind it, and then looking at what plan can we set that is going to help you move towards the place where you want to be. So it's about setting objectives, staying accountable to those objectives, but also in that process, gaining an understanding and an awareness of why. As a leader, you will be doing that with your staff. And as a leader, you're doing that anyway, even with the single assessment alone. Think about the questions that you ask the parents. Think about the pre-populated areas in the single assessments that we have these days. What's happening? You're asking questions about, okay, what is the challenge? Okay, tell me a bit more about that. How did this come about? What's the story behind it? What is needed to help you move from that place to this place? That is what coaching is. You've been listening to Lisa Rann on the Dear Social Worker podcast, the podcast that prioritizes the person behind the title social worker. I'm your host, Lisa Rann, and I hope you've been inspired and encouraged in your personal development and your leadership development for your social work practice. Don't forget, brand new book is going to be launched. Visit me on Instagram at Dear Social Worker Podcast. Send me an email to get on the list for when it is launched, and I'll be giving a treat to the first 5 people who do so on info@socialworkcoachinghub.com. And I just want to say thank you to all of the listeners. We've got listeners from all across the world. It's just magnificent that I'm able to do this and to share with you and to inspire you and to give you a glimmer of hope in the midst of the busyness. I hope after you've listened to today's podcast, you've got an idea, a richer idea of what leadership is about, how you can implement it, what leadership coaching is about, but also what I want to bring it back to one of the first words that I used here, busyness. Define it for yourself, understand what it means for you, how it's showing up for you. And if you need some support with that, if you need some help with understanding your leadership qualities or filling in your leadership growth areas, things that you want to progress to do, if you're unsure what to do, I've said this every week, it's all over my Instagram and my LinkedIn. I have a discounted price for my coaching up until the 10th of June. The 10th of June. After that point, the launch price will be over. So until then, I will see you again. And don't forget, leave me a review, interact with the Spotify questions. I lost my train of thought then. It's coming to the end. It's coming to the end. It's been lovely speaking with you all. I will see you all again, and I trust that you will have a great week, because the sun is shining here in the UK, and that doesn't, for those of you listening across the world, it doesn't happen very often. So that's why, just to let you know, we get so excited. Anyway, I'm going to go and enjoy the sun myself, and I will see you all again soon. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.